was a information shared to us by MSBA. This is not a requirement, but we thought, given that we're streaming now, we thought this would be a good idea to read this at the start of each board meeting. So I'm going to take the minute or so to do so. So due to the current federal and state emergency declarations, the Minnesota Directive to Residents to Stay at Home, and guidance about limiting person-to-person contact due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting of the White Bear Lake Area School District School Board is being conducted in accordance with Minnesota Statutes 13D.021, meetings by telephone or other electronic means. School board members are reminded to mute their microphone when they are not speaking. School board members wishing to speak should use the chat feature and then wait to be recognized by the chair. The chair will determine the order in which board members wishing to speak will be recognized. When recognized, the board member should unmute the microphone, speak, and then mute their device. All votes will be conducted by roll call. Each school board member should wait until their name is called before voting. This meeting is being recorded. Access to the recording will be made available on the school district's website as soon as is reasonably possible. And please note that the video will be closed captioned as soon as it is possible for the script to be transcribed, which normally occurs within 1 week of the meeting. Okay, that's it, Mr. Mullen.
Thank you. I would ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Arcand.
Here.
Lloyd. Here. Chapman.
Here.
Allison here. Mullen.
Here.
Newmaster.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Thank you. We will now move into our first discussion item, which is D1, which is the action on the approval of the property purchase agreements. Is that Dr. Kazmierczak? Mr.
Yep,
Wald?
I'll take that, and then Mr. Wald is here as well if there are any questions. But we've shared with you information about 4 different properties. Similar to the last couple of meetings, we've approved the purchase agreements at the board meetings. So you've got information about that, and they're listed in the board packet. And I if you want, Mr. Chair, I can read the recommended action if that's what you prefer, and then if there's conversation, we could do it within that.
That's fine, sir.
Okay. Okay, so the recommended action is to move to approve the purchase agreements for the properties described as PID number 143-022-12001, PID number 113-022-430019, PID number 143-022-130042, and PID 143-022-130040, located in the city of White Bear Lake, County of Ramsey, state of Minnesota. The board authorizes the superintendent and the assistant superintendent for finance and operations to sign all documents as necessary to acquire said properties.
You've heard the recommended action. Is there a motion to do so?
So moved.
A motion by
So
Mr.
moved.
Chapman. Is there a second?
Second. Marge Newmaster.
Second. I'm sorry, Marge. Deb beat you out. There's
Okay.
a second by Ms. Beloyd. Is there any discussion regarding said action? Hearing or seeing none, this will require a roll call vote. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Arcand.
Aye.
Lloyd.
Aye.
Chapman.
Aye.
Allison I. Mullen.
Aye.
Newmaster.
Aye.
Thompson.
Aye.
The motion passes. We will now move into our second discussion item, D2, which is the transportation contract addendum, excuse me. Mr. Wald?
Yeah, thank you. So due to the executive order to transition schools to distance learning format, we no longer need the services we typically rely on for transportation. The executive order said that schools should maintain a collaborative relationship with transportation providers and honor those contracts. And so we were looking for guidance from MDE, and the guidance from MDE indicates that schools should pay contractors so that they can pay their employees, but regular payments should be adjusted so the contractors don't realize profits during this time. So working with that guidance, we are offering our primary contractor First Student 90% of their regular payments during the distance learning period. So 90% of their regular payments, and then our remaining 4 contractors, we're offering 85% of their regular payments. Reason it's different between First Student and our other contractors is that our contracts are different. So in First Student, we don't pay fuel as part of the contract. We pay that separately. And so they won't be realizing the fuel savings, while our other contractors will realize a fuel savings during this time, and that's reflecting the percentage that we'll be paying them. Contractors are required to provide assurances to the district that they'll continue to pay their employees during this time. And we expect to see a savings of about $90,000 during this distance learning period.
So go ahead, I'm sorry.
So the recommendation is that the board approve a resolution to for the contract addendums to our transportation providers.
So you've heard the recommended action. Is there a motion to do so?
So moved.
A motion by Ms. Ellison. Is there a second?
This was Marge attempting to say second.
I'm sorry, Marge. I got you. By Dr. Newmaster is the second. Any discussion regarding said action? I got a quick question, Tim. Mr. Wald, what are the assurances that those contractors will continue to pay their employees?
Well, we've asked them to provide that assurance in writing. And if at any time we lose confidence in that, we'll ask for payroll records. We haven't asked them to provide their payroll records yet, but just an assurance in writing that they'll be continuing to pay their employees.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion regarding the action? Hearing and seeing none, this will require a roll call vote. But ask the clerk to please read the roll.
Arcand,
Aye.
Lloyd,
Aye.
Chapman,
Aye.
Ellison, I, Mullen,
Aye.
Newmaster,
Aye.
Thompson.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Thank you. We will now move to our third discussion item, D3, which is the update on honoring the 2020 graduates. Dr. Kazmierczak, is this you?
All right, I can certainly introduce it and I'll turn it over. But so there's been a lot of discussion about honoring our 2020 graduates. And now that we know the fate of the school year, that will become even more important that we end up landing on a decision about that. And I know Mr. Bosch has been working pretty hard on this already. So he's here tonight to give us an update on the current thinking. And I know Mr. Wald has been involved in some of those conversations too. So with that, I would turn it over to either Mr. Wald or Mr. Bosch.
Thank you, Dr. Kazmierczak. Board Mullen, Chair Mullen, members of the board, thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. So as Dr. Kazmierczak mentioned, now that we've got some clarity around our distance learning for the remainder of the school year, we've started conversations in regarding to honoring our class of 2020. Actually, we've started this conversation before the governor's press conference last week. I started a committee that involves about 30 plus senior students. That committee was started about 2.5 to 3 weeks ago. We actually had our first meeting probably about a week and a half ago to get an understanding of where our senior class was in regards to honoring their class during this distance learning process. We have another meeting scheduled for tomorrow, and then we'll have future meetings scheduled throughout the remainder of the school year as we continue to have discussions around honoring our class of 2020. I think it's important to know, I think everybody does know that all of our students, but especially the class of 2020, they've missed out on a lot of senior events so far this second semester of the school year. And so it's important that we take into consideration their voice in regards to what's the best way that we can possibly honor the class of 2020 in our graduation ceremony. At the same time, I think the difficult piece for us is trying to provide a personal ceremony for the class of 2020, while at the same time following social distancing guidelines that are put in place by the Minnesota Department of Health and the CDC as well. So I'd have to say the first meeting we had with our committee was a great meeting. A lot of positive ideas that came out of that meeting. They asked myself to kind of look into possible ideas, and we're going to provide them with some updates tomorrow, and then kind of move forward from there. So some of the ideas that we've discussed up to this point was looking at some type of virtual ceremony, and I think it's important that right now our senior class feels that it's very important, if it's all possible, to try to have some type of traditional ceremony like we've had in the past. That was very evident that came through in our last meeting. And so we're going to continue to explore that option as a possibility. But at the same time, also knowing that we still have a stay-at-home order in place, which I'm sure will be updated this week by the governor. And also the social distancing guidelines that I talked about earlier. We also have to look at a possible like plan B, which might be some type of virtual ceremony that might happen on the date of our graduation. With also maybe some type of celebration that would occur later in the summer once maybe some of those guidelines have been lifted. Some of the committee members have talked about other ways to look at honoring our students in regards to that would look differently than maybe some of our traditional ceremonies that have done in the past. Just kind of give you an idea of some of the suggestions that have come up. Looking up splitting up the class into smaller groups, if that's a possibility. Also trying to maintain social distancing by doing that. Possibly looking at maybe other venues than Aldrich Arena that maybe will give us some greater flexibility in regards to implementing social distancing guidelines. Looking at what other districts are trying to do. I know some are looking at renting out other venues. Example would be Washington County Fairgrounds. I know a couple of school districts are looking into that and doing more of a virtual ceremony in regards to kind of like a drive-in movie theater type format. Also, we know some post-secondary institutions have done some things as well. The Air Force Academy, for an example, was pretty creative in honoring their graduates, where they did a model of spreading out their graduates across the field to maintain that social distancing, and then doing a live stream for parents and relatives to observe. So we're going to continue to explore options. Like I said earlier, I think it's important that our seniors have a voice in this, and we will continue to make sure that they have a voice in this, and look for the best possible scenario that can come from all of this. Mr. Wall,
Thank you.
anything that you'd like to add?
No, just acknowledging that from the get-go, you're just appreciating your energy around getting students at the table right away. So kids felt, we get their opinion on it because their opinion is what matters the most in this situation.
All right, Principal Bosch, Mr. Wald, I appreciate both of you guys' help with updating. I would open it up to questions from any board members. Ms. Bloyd?
Yeah, I was just wondering, do we think we could fit all of our grads on our football field with the social distancing? So, like they're talking about being outside, would we actually have enough room on our football field to do that?
That's a great question. That's something that we have to look into a little bit with a more further detail. But I think it might be something that we could explore.
And I was also wondering, when with watching the news, especially when you're seeing the news with New York City, where the people would start clapping or whatever a certain period of time, I was wondering if maybe our communities would be interested in doing something like that to honor the grads, where everyone in White Bear Lake and all the surrounding communities would know at a certain time everyone could walk outside and start clapping, and all of the seniors could know what that was for. And maybe it could be like before the actual ceremony or something, so seniors could actually be outside to hear everybody in the community clapping for them.
Yeah, another great idea. That's something that we can definitely look into as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, I have a couple. When do you think, when's the timeline around a decision being made so that our students are able to, however we need to handle those things, are able to make decisions accordingly?
So if we look at doing some type of virtual ceremony in addition to something else, we're working with a company in regards to that. So timeline for them is they need to have some of those pieces in place about 4 to 5 weeks out. So we're getting pretty close to that timeline. In regards to landing on a definite plan, I think it's important that the sooner we can come up with a plan, the better, just so we can inform our community, our parents, and our senior class. So my hope would probably be in the next, hopefully 2 to 3 weeks, if not sooner.
All right, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Principal Bosch, thank you very much.
I think
Appreciate it.
Board Member Thompson had a question in regards on the
there's
chat in
it.
regards to prom.
Board Member
yes.
Go.
Sorry. Is there any communications on possibly doing something for that as well? And I have heard a lot of parents really would like to somehow be involved, and I understand that's not possibly possible, but they have mentioned the movie drive-in theater as, possibly a way where they can at least be present in the process. So just wanted to say that, but ask about prom really.
Yeah, so in regards to prom, we have our activities director, Brian Pelican, has been working with our prom advisors along with our prom committee to look at what are possible alternatives in regards to prom. So I know a survey is going to be sent out to our students to see what they would like to do with prom. The initial conversations have come back where they would like to hold prom later in the summer if that's at all possible.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other comments, questions? I don't see any other ones. So thank you both for your work. I really appreciate it, and we'll look forward to the updates as they are made available.
Thank you.
With that, we will go into our next discussion item, B4, which is the school finance update. Mr. Wald, I'm assuming this is you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Mullen, members of the board, Dr. Kazmierczak. It's been a crazy couple of months here in the school district and across the world, I suppose. And so we've thought it was a good time for us to bring just a financial impact presentation to the board tonight, just to fill you in on thinking that we have, the best thinking we have at this point anyways, around the impact of the COVID-19 situation on our school budget. So I'll walk you through that tonight, and certainly be opportunity for questions and discussion. We'll talk about the federal response, the CARES Act and what that means for schools, what the state response and legislature has been so far, potential future funding impacts. We'll look at the impact on fee-based funds such as nutrition and community services. And then we'll also talk about some immediate intervention strategies that we are doing. As far as the federal COVID response, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, that's the CARES Act that we've heard about, includes an element called the Education Stabilization Fund that provides $13.5 billion in state aid to departments of education to support schools. There's really a broad discretion on how those funds can be used. It lists within the act, it lists many different ideas, but ends with implementing activities to maintain the operation and continuity of services and to employ existing staff. And so it does definitely lead a lot of discretion up to the states on how they're going to use those funds, as well as to the school districts and how they're going to use those funds. Funds will be distributed to schools relative to their Title I funding. So schools with significant Title I funding will receive a significant portion. Schools with less Title I funding would receive a smaller relevant portion. And that, of course, is aimed at assuring that more funds go to school districts where there is the greatest need. We're expecting that those funds will flow to the state sometime the end of May or early June. There's also some funds from the U.S. Department of Education. That's the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. There's $3 billion to be used, and that's actually being shared by a lot larger group. That includes K-12. Also, public, charter, and private schools would be included in that. States could use that money for higher ed as they see fit. They're estimating Minnesota is going to get about 43 million of that, and it's completely up to the governors on how those funds would be distributed. And those are really based on a straight percentage of the state population of school-age children, and then a percentage of birth to age 24 population. I get 60% and 40% of each of those. The Minnesota legislature has been working hard on this, but hasn't acted yet. And so there's a lot of debating still going on in Minnesota. As we understand it, they've adjusted to the Zoom style negotiating and discussions, and they're starting to get pretty fluid at it, but we still don't have decisions yet on how this is going to work at the state level. So, but we do believe that the funding formula is going to stay the same, that districts will receive funding based on their ADM and their days of school, and all the days during closure and distance learning will count as regular school days. They've allowed some flexibility to code our special education salaries and expenses to special education, even if they might not otherwise qualify for special education funding. So where we use special education paraprofessionals per se, working in a daycare site, we could still charge those funds toward special education. We can bill as we would normally bill for that position. There's allowance for fund transfers or interfund transfers. So when if a district has one fund that is running at perhaps no fund balance, that there could be a transfer from another fund that's more solvent in order just to keep all the funds afloat. So they're just giving flexibility to districts to do that. And that's not typical. Usually funds stay within the fund and you're not allowed to move them between funds. But in this case, they're allowing flexibility on that. The other kind of head scratcher for us is that property taxes are being delayed. Income taxes and property taxes are being delayed. And so we expect that we're going to see a delay in revenue from our state taxes. We think we'll be okay with that we'll have cash revenues, fund balance that will allow us not to have to borrow money during that delay of funding. But that is a reality that you'll be hearing about, and many school districts are trying to figure out, as well as cities. We'll get into what the general fund experience we think is going to be through the end of this school year. We went into this school year with 11.7% unassigned fund balance. We thought that was going to grow by about 531,000 this year and get us closer to that 12.5% school board policy minimum fund balance. And so we're moving along toward that, and that's been a priority for us to get that fund balance back into the 12.5%. We don't think we're going to lose a lot of revenue in Fund 1 because there's not a lot of revenue or fee revenue in Fund 1. So we refunded $70,000 in spring activities. We think that's about it there. We think there's going to be some savings in operational costs in the tune of $700,000. And so we think that for this year, that'll push our unassigned fund balance up to about 12.9%. So that's the good news for now, but there's a lot of things we don't know. So when we look at that 12.9% and think, well, we have some wiggle room to do some things, we have a lot more questions than we have wiggle room. We don't know how this COVID-19 experience is going to impact our enrollment in the future. Will we be getting all of our students back in the fall like we would expect, or are we going to see a change in enrollment? What expenses will we incur this summer? There's so much we don't know about what our summer programming is going to look like and what will that mean for us. We certainly would question the revenues that would come in the summer. What will future funding look like as we get into future years? And then fees for services will be impacted, and that kind of transitions us to the next slide of future funding considerations. We know that schools, when the state economy is not doing well, schools do not thrive during that time period. So there's a symbiotic relationship between state revenues and state budgets and school district budgets. So the first bullet, the governor ordered a new budget forecast report for May. Usually that comes in June, but sources are telling us that revenues for February and March were down 108 million, and that certainly is a signal for what's to come in April, May, and beyond. We'd likely see significant less in state revenues. State officials worked hard after the 2008 recession to rebuild the rainy day fund back to the $2 billion level. And we'll likely use a significant portion of those funds, if not all of those funds. I'm sure that'll be a big discussion at the legislature. The funding formula for FY21, that's the 2020-2021 school year, is in statute already. That was from second year of the biennium, and so it's likely that that funding will remain. How we get that funding and what the schedule looks like is a much bigger question. If you recall, in 2009, the state balanced the budget by delaying payments to school districts to the tune of about 30%. Usually we get 90% of our funding during the school year and remaining 10% the following year. In 2009, they changed that to closer to 70-30. And so the school districts funding was delayed a year, which school districts were able to do by borrowing money. And so if for school districts to borrow money, you pay to borrow money, but they eventually did get all of the funding. And so will that be a scenario we'll see again in FY21? Possibly. And then FY22 and FY23, we would expect that that there's not going to be good funding years for school districts. Even at 2% we've had for the last several years, school districts don't maintain their budget at 2%. It takes more than that. Typically the formula only applies, the per student formula only applies to about 65% of a school district's budget. And so when it's a 2% increase, that certainly doesn't cover the increase in expenses to a school district. So if we were to see in the next biennium numbers less than 2% or even down towards zero, schools will not thrive in that situation. Some immediate interventions that we're taking right now is, we talked about transportation contracts earlier tonight. I think we'll save $90,000 through that effort. We've powered down our buildings, using less water, trash, recycling. Those expenses are going to save us about $160,000 during this time period. Moving on to Nutrition Services Fund. So Nutrition Services started this school year with 16.4% fund balance on the high end of what the board asked us to have. But we knew we would be spending some of that down for some capital expenditures. That includes some technology improvements that we're making to our point of sale service, some capital expenditures. We expected that to get spent down a little bit this year. But what we didn't expect, of course, was the COVID-19 projected revenue loss of over $1 million. And that's just due to lunch fees. There is a little bit of savings in there in that we've certainly reduced our food orders during this time. And so we'll save $476,000 in food orders. And so, but the net impact on our nutrition services fund balance is it completely wipes it out. It actually dips into the negative number for nutrition services fund balance. They're doing champion work in that department. And, hats off to Bridget Lane. And I think she's in the meeting if we have questions for her later, but her department has done amazing work. And they've worked hard over the years to build their fund balance up through great discipline in that department. And so it's disheartening to see that wiped out in just a few months. Moving on to Fund 4, Community Services Fund. Again, Mr. Maurer and his department went into the year with 17.7% fund balance. They were expecting a deficit. As you know, we've been building some staffing up in that department, trying to meet the demand in the community for extended day and early childhood services, our fee-based programs. But the projected revenue loss in fourth quarter, is significant, $772,000 in lost tuition and fees in community services. So that $1.2 million fund balance in community services is down to below $448,429, down to 6.5%. What's important to know about community services too is they expect a bit of a fund balance going into the summer, and actually collecting revenues in the summer that give them a fund balance for fall when before their fall revenues come in, they have a lot of bills to pay. And so they need a little cushion in that department to be able to start in the fall. This is a challenge in this department because we don't know what our summer programming is going to look like yet. A lot of unanswered questions. I skipped over something on slide 2. We'll go back to in a minute, but I want to show this next element on community services, Fund 4. So this is the same slide with 2 more lines at the bottom, and that shows on our next agenda item where we're going to talk about recommended furloughs, that the projected savings through furlough in community services is $177,000. And so if that's executed, it'll bring the fund balance more into the 9% range, 9.1% in community services. And if we can just slide back 2 slides to, yes, that one, then you'll see the fund balance in nutrition services with the furloughs would bring us at 1.8%. It's a little bit of a fund balance, not much of one, but it brings us positive instead of negative. So that's funds 1, 2, and 4. I'd say in summary, Fund 1 comes out of this year okay, but with a lot of question marks and likelihood that over the next few years, we're going to need a significant fund balance to weather the storm. Funds 2 and 4 are set back quite a bit by this situation. They continue to do great work, but it's definitely a significant issue for us to address. So the next topic on the agenda is regarding furloughs. And so we won't get into that a whole lot right now because that's our next topic. But in a nutshell, that's kind of what we have. Where we know we're at right now, there's still a lot of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wald, for the update. Is there anybody have any questions for Mr. Wald? Okay. A lot of difficult decisions that are upcoming regarding funds, I understand. So with that, just want to make sure that no one else had any questions. We will thank you very much, and we'll move on to our next discussion item, B5, which is the action on the reduction in staff in fee-based programs. Mr. Mons, is that you?
Yes, it is. Good evening, Chair Mullen, members of the board. As you can see from Mr. Wald's presentation there, we do face some significant challenges in our fee-based areas. We're at a point where our staffing is significantly exceeding the amount of programming that we're able to offer at this time. And so we have gone through the exercise and taken it extremely seriously to ask ourselves, what would we need to do in order to align that staffing with the programming that we're able to offer, and what recommendations could we make that would allow our fee-based programs to move through the summer and hopefully into next year in a place where they can still have a positive fund balance. One thing that I would note too is that those numbers that Tim shared with us, those are a snapshot in time as of June 30th. And one thing that I would note in nutrition services is that there will still be a struggle as we move into the fall to make sure that we're aligning staffing with revenue that we're bringing in. And we're certain that there's going to be challenges there. And then even more so in community ed, we expect that there's going to be continued challenges and that we will cut into that existing fund balance that you could see there in that last slide, even more so after June 30th. And so I just want to state that's not necessarily the shape we would move into the start of our next school year in, but the shape that we would be in as of June 30th if we didn't take any action, and then if we moved forward with some furloughs. A couple of other points that I'd like to make regarding the resolution that the board does have before them is that we're extremely hopeful. Of course, things can change, and we never expected to be in this place only a couple of months ago. But we're extremely hopeful that the employees that we're looking at for furloughs here, for layoffs, we're hoping that that can be temporary, and that nearly all of these employees can be recalled when they were regularly scheduled to return to work after this school year. So for individuals that were planning on working during the summer, we're hopeful that we'll be able to still make that happen as early as the beginning or middle of June here. And for those employees who were scheduled to resume work in the fall, we're certainly hopeful that that will be able to happen. We're planning on running that programming, and we're looking at all the ways that we can continue to offer services to our stakeholders and make sure that we still have opportunities for all of our stakeholders, our community, and for our employees here. A couple of other notes. Number one, with these recommendations, we also wanted to make absolutely certain that for these intervening 5 weeks and what could be longer for some of our employees, we want to make sure that we're creating as easy a path to unemployment benefits as possible for those employees. So we're taking that into consideration as we're moving forward. And we want to make sure that if anyone is furloughed or faces a temporary layoff, that we assist them, and certainly would never stand as a roadblock to our employees receiving those benefits. It's also not lost on us, and we take it extremely seriously, that what we're talking about here is over 130 employees that are extremely valuable to our organization. A great number of these employees have been assisting us on the front lines to meet the mandate that was set forth by the governor to provide services to our community in terms of providing distance learning, childcare for essential employees, and then also meals to all the stakeholders in our system that need them. So with that, we're certainly available to answer any questions. As we went through this process, we feel confident that we're going to be able to continue to provide a high level of service in all of the areas where we still have programming running for our stakeholders, but that this will allow our staffing to much more closely align to that level of programming.
With that, I would open it up to questions. Ms. Ellison.
Mr. Mons, I just have a question. These are furloughs and not layoffs, correct?
That's not the way that contracts or state statute really work. Okay. And so it is absolutely our intention that nearly all of these, 99%, are going to be temporary in nature. However, we don't know when we're going to be able to recall employees, and there's so many things up in the air right now. One thing that I would note, though, is for employees that have been in our system, if they're facing a layoff here, they're placed on a leave of absence. They're still employees of the district, and they absolutely have recall rights, and we can't wait until we're able to be in a position to recall them. So I want to make that extremely clear. We're using the language of furloughs, because it really is our intention. So that's the language that we're often using with employees. However, technically these are layoffs under our collectively bargained agreements.
And then what about health insurance?
And so when it comes to health insurance, we're looking at a couple of things. Number one, we were quite intentional that we wanted to make sure that employees' last day of work was into the month of May. And so that's going to allow for coverage through the entirety of the month of May. We also looked at what the costs in expenditure versus savings would look like. And we've also made a commitment to going beyond our normal practice and what's outlined in our collectively bargained agreements to say that we want to ensure that we can finish this fiscal year for the district without any employees losing their health insurance. So eligible employees will be able to retain the district's contribution towards insurance through June 30th of this year. Just additionally too, it's not ideal and it's not a position that we want to have any of our employees face. However, when an employee is faced with needing to make a COBRA decision, so continuing coverage after employment, one piece there, and we've had conversations with our union stewards and local union representatives around this, is that employees can, there is a look back period there. So employees who may elect not to renew their insurance temporarily can, in those cases, if any hardship does befall them, they can pick up coverage again at that time.
Thank you very much. And thank you to for all of your work, and then to all of these employees that have been holding us together for the past couple of weeks. They've done tremendous work.
Dr. Newmaster, did you have a question?
I do, and I will have to get a chat lesson because I'm not sure where that typing went, but I did type. I had a question originally for Mr. Wald, but it kind of dribbled into this topic too, because it's really hard things to decide and to look at and to question. And all the people that have been providing these emergency services are more impacted than anyone, it sounds like right now, whether it's the drivers who brought lunches or equipment different places, the cooks, the people that took care of all the kids of workers that needed to work. My question was, is there any funding from COVID for the incredible services that are still provided to our kids that need them? And if these people are furloughed, it sounds like you're going to attempt to continue to provide lunches and things like that, even though, and daycare. I guess that's my question. Is there funding that will give you relief right now with the budget to pay for these needed services?
Tim, let me, go for it. Okay, Tim, let me just take the first run at that, and then if you want to follow up, that'd be great. So, part of the reason that we have been a little rushed in how we've moved through these decisions, been that things keep changing rapidly here. And we've been really hopeful that we were going to see funding that would help support us in those fee-based areas for individuals that were providing those services. But at this point, we haven't identified any direct funding that we're going to be able to use, which doesn't mean that it's impossible that it will materialize at some point. But it's getting pretty hard to believe that it's going to be able to be impactful yet this school year. So Tim, if you have any other thoughts or updates on that front.
I was going to say about the same thing, that, we don't know if we have any funds. We know that there will be some funds from the CARES Act. We don't know for sure when that's going to come. We don't know how much that's going to mean for us. And we also know that we don't know how school is going to start next year, what that's going to look like, and what type of expenditures that might create for us. And so I think there'd be hesitation for us to spread ourselves any more thin than we absolutely have to, not knowing what fall is going to look like for us.
Ms. Beloy, did you have a question?
Yeah, this probably goes to both of you. How much shuffling around are we going to have to do with this? Because my understanding was right now you have a lot of the elementary school paras working in these sites at Onika, Birch, and I'm forgetting the other one, but how much shuffling around of people are we going to need to do? And I just wanted to also make sure that I understood what groups we're talking about. Because we're not talking about busing, but we're talking about the people who work under the umbrella of nutrition services, under the umbrella of community service. So that would include extended day and all of those things. So, but not the daycare. I'm getting a little confused as to who's going to be staying on to take care of the kids that we're required to and which ones are not.
Yep. Okay, absolutely. I'll take that one. So first of all, I'm just going to start with nutrition services, and then we'll move into that childcare environment. And I just want to note that we are going to have a team of over 20 core members of our nutrition services team that's going to be staying on in order to ensure that we're able to provide all of the meals that we've currently been providing. And so that's the plan in that area. And we've got that staffed, and there's a high level of confidence that we'll be in a good place there. If we find that things change in any of these areas, remember too, that we are able to recall employees as that would become necessary or possible. And then moving into the slightly more complicated area of our childcare settings. So at Onika, Birch, and Willow, where we currently have care, it's actually all of our paras are currently working part-time in those environments. So not just elementary, but all of our paraprofessionals are doing that. We also have essentially all of our other non-teaching educational support staff working in that environment, whether it's providing clerical support to help at those sites where there's additional need there, or providing direct care. So when we're talking, it's a huge village of people that are coming together to provide that care. One note that I would make with our extended day staff, we are retaining all of our full-time extended day staff. And so this is not to diminish the role that our part-time extended day staff have been playing in making this work, because it's been absolutely crucial, and it's going to be somewhat Herculean to pull this off in this new environment. However, in terms of consistency for the student and family experience at those sites, we are going to have all of our full-time staff still providing service there. What this is going to mean is that we're going to relook at schedules where we've had employees that have been part-time at the child care center and who have been providing other services part-time. We're going to look at expanding their hours of operation at the child care center. When it comes to paraprofessionals, one thing that I do want to make very clear, though, is we're not going to be pulling paraprofessionals from the work that they've been doing in terms of providing direct support for students. And so that's work that's going to continue. So this decision does not mean that students are going to miss out in their distance learning or have that experience impacted by this decision. So it is going to be some shuffling. It's going to be a lot of hard work making sure that this comes together. But that's what it's going to look like. It's going to look like using all of our existing resources a little differently.
So forgive me for asking this question, but how does it not take away from some of those kids when we're using, so if the paras are doing half time with the kids, half time with their para duties, if we're upping that time, how does that not take away from the para duties?
We're not looking at increasing that time. So we're looking at keeping that time essentially static. The time of the day that somebody might work in that setting, that could certainly change. But in terms of the amount of time that paraprofessionals are spending with direct student support and with our case managers, that shouldn't change.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Are there any other questions regarding the resolution? Seeing none, I would ask then, there's a resolution attached to the board packet. I would ask for a motion to adopt the resolution.
So moved.
A motion by Ms. Beloit. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second, I'll second.
A
Ms.
second.
Thompson.
Second by Ms. Thompson. Any other discussion regarding the resolution, the motion, excuse me? Hearing or seeing none, this will require a roll call vote. Would ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Arcand,
Aye.
Beloit,
Aye.
Chapman,
Sorry about that. Aye.
Ellison, I, Mullen,
Aye.
Newmaster,
Aye.
Thompson.
Aye.
The resolution passes. For the next agenda item, I've been asked to turn the chair over to Vice Chair Chapman, and because regarding the nature of the next piece. So at this time, I will get off the line, turn the chair over to Vice Chair Kim Chapman, where I just wanted to say that I wish you all, I hope that everyone is safe, and I hope to see you guys in a couple weeks. Thank you very much. Mr. Chapman.
Okay, thank you, Chair Mullen. And I guess at this point, Dr. Kazmierczak, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chapman, members of the board. We do have School Board Attorney Mick Waldsberger present. Mick, can you hear us?
I certainly can. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. So I guess we'll just turn it over to you to kick this one off.
Yeah, absolutely. As you recall, in February, I presented to the board on the pros and cons of project labor agreements. And as part of that discussion, I let the board know that you would have to make a determination of whether any of your members had a conflict of interest. And your board chair, Don Mullen, appropriately volunteered that he believed he would have a conflict. And that's why he's elected to step out here tonight. And certainly appreciate him coming forward with that. Pursuant to your policy, we did an investigation, which involved me interviewing each of the board members. I then put together an attorney-client privileged letter to the board with my analysis and specifically my findings and conclusions from that investigation. And the short of it is that I do agree with Board Chair Mullen that he would have a statutory conflict of interest in the event that the district were to entertain a project labor agreement with the St. Paul Building and Construction Trades Council, which I'll refer to as the St. Paul Council. During the course of the investigation, Mr. Mullen informed me that because of that concern, the St. Paul Council would not be involved in any kind of proposal to make a project labor agreement. Rather, it would be the Minnesota State Building Construction Trades Council. And so then we had to do an analysis of whether that would present a conflict of interest. For Mr. Mullen, the short of that is that it would not present a statutory conflict of interest because he would not have any personal financial interest, would not benefit personally financially from that arrangement. However, for the reasons articulated in my letter to the board, I do believe that that would present a common law conflict of interest. Unlike a statutory conflict of interest, which cannot be cured or avoided by abstaining from a vote, a common law conflict of interest can be avoided by abstaining from the vote, and also from any discussion regarding the matter, because in the eyes of the law, you don't want to be in a position where you have a conflict, you're trying to persuade your other members of the board to take a particular action, and then you just stop up the last minute and say, oh, I'm not going to vote. I've said my piece, I've persuaded everyone, and now I'm not going to vote. So law doesn't allow you to do that. If you've got a conflict, you step out from the discussion as well. And again, Mr. Mullen has appropriately elected to do that. Also, as part of the analysis, we needed to take a look at whether Board Member Thompson has a conflict of interest. The short answer to that is that she does not have a legal conflict, either a statutory or a common law conflict of interest. In my professional opinion, she does have an appearance of impropriety if she were to vote on this matter. And I've laid out the reasons for that, but she effectively reports directly to Mr. Mullen. She works, she's only one of 2 employees for the St. Paul Council, which supports the Minnesota Council. She receives a bonus which has no criteria at the end of the year. It's a discretionary bonus. And I certainly don't want to suggest that she has any ill motives or she would engage in any form of wrongdoing. That's not what an appearance of impropriety is about. An appearance of impropriety is a notion that the public might lose confidence in a board's actions or trust in a board's actions because they view somebody as having split loyalties. And that's the concern I would have here, is how the public might justifiably view this. I would want to say that during the course of my investigation, I found Ms. Thompson to be fully forthcoming. She clearly has her own views, but she is certainly in favor of unions, and that is entirely appropriate for her to have those views. I don't have any personal reason, based on my investigation or professional reason, to believe that she would, again, do anything inappropriate. But at center, that's not what an appearance of propriety is about. An appearance of impropriety means we're in a situation where the public can, again, say, boy, that person might be acting in his or her own interests, or they might be acting in the interest of the board and the public and the community. And so I leave it to you for, if you have any disagreement with that, you can certainly modify the proposed resolution accordingly. I have submitted to the board a proposed resolution, which would just confirm the results of the investigation. The resolution does note that Board Member Thompson has an appearance of impropriety and discourages her from participating in discussions and voting, but does not prohibit her from doing that, because I don't believe you have the legal authority to prohibit her. It could be a potential violation of your policy, but that's something you'd have to look at in retrospect, depending on what happened. So my advice and my recommendation is that you vote on and adopt the resolution that has been presented and proposed to you. And with that, I'm certainly happy to respond to any questions you might have.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Wald or Mr. Waldsberger? Ms. Ellison.
Mr. Waldsberger, I just have a question about the letter that you sent us and the client lawyer privilege. A lot of the things that you just said are in the letter, but also in the resolution. How does client lawyer privilege work? If I were to ask a question about the letter in this setting, does that violate that privilege? I want to make sure I'm not asking things that are privileged.
Yep, that's an excellent question. You can ask me questions that might be privileged. It's just that because there's not an appropriate ground for us to be in closed session, because I'm not advising relative to potential litigation at this point in time, we have to do that either in writing, which would be protected, or in this open session now. So you can ask the question in open session. The primary reason why I wanted to maintain the privileged nature of the communication, the thrust of it I've just discussed, but there are some nuances. In particular, as part of that investigation, I look into the structure and the pay and things of that nature with respect to the council. And I don't know that the council would want that disclosed. And if it's unnecessary to do so, I'd like to maintain that. As I said in the letter too, the board could certainly vote to make a limited disclosure of the privilege and to waive the privilege just with respect to the letter itself, if you thought that that was appropriate. I don't think that that's necessary to carry out your duties, but that's a decision that's within your purview. But you can certainly ask any questions if you have them.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's basically what I wanted to know. And as far as impropriety, that is a sense of how the community views us as a governing body, right? If there seems to be a sense of impropriety, it's how the community views the work that we do and whether or not we're acting in the community's interest. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, broken down to its simplest form, it's this notion that a reasonable member of your community might find an action to be inappropriate or question the appropriateness of it because of your potential split loyalties, if you will. So it's really this notion of instilling confidence in the public that we're not going to put ourselves in a position where the public has to guess, are we acting in our interest or in the board's interest? And we look at a number of factors, kind of like a common law conflict of interest. If all members of the board had a potential appearance of impropriety, then the courts say, well, you got to vote, you got to be able to act. But if it's unnecessary for someone to do so because they can just step away from that discussion, then that's an easy way to resolve it. But ultimately, that's a decision that Ms. Thompson will have to make.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Thompson, I believe you would like to ask a question.
If no one else had any questions, I have a few, not really questions, but statements I would like to make before a decision is made, if that is possible.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. There were a couple things that one thing would be the worrying about the impropriety of appearance amongst the community. I believe that my being on the school board and being voted in by the citizens was them saying that they wanted my voice at the table. That's just one of the things I would like to say. Another thing, there's many things I have a couple issues. I have an issue with this interview being done in February, and the information that was gathered in that interview back in February has not been released until today, this morning. Did not give me time to prepare. It's my husband's birthday today, on top of working, helping kids with school, and trying to cook him a dinner before I got to this meeting. This was kind of a little bit of a blind side. Would have preferred to have gotten this quite a while ago, so I could have prepared a little more and asked some questions before this meeting was pulled together, and also to question a few of the things that are in the document. There's a couple things where there's in number 15, it says that I declined to answer a question. I would just say to the board members who read that my declining to answer that question was based on the fact that I was being asked to say what others would do or say or think, and I don't feel that it is my place. I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for others and how they think or what they feel. And it was asked to me multiple times. And yes, I did refuse to answer it because I wasn't answering for myself. I answered for myself, but refused to put words into others' mouths of how they feel or think about things. That's one thing. As far as my bonus goes, I would be more than happy to tell anybody exactly how much it is, and it's given to any person who worked at my job before me, worked there for over 30 years. She received the same bonus every year as a kind gesture for her work, and it is the exact same amount that has been passed down for 30 years, so it has nothing to do with me personally. It doesn't change. It hasn't changed. It is not of any monetary, it's very, that's just one thing. So it's not, I don't get a bonus based on things I do for the council. Another one was that upon further reflection, speaking of me and saying what I believe people who voted for me would think, that's a little bit taken out of context as well. Or at least I feel it's a little out of context. I feel that when I went and knocked doors last fall to get elected, and I worked really hard to do it, and I spoke to a lot of people, and everybody I talked to knew all very well who I was, what I stand for, what my beliefs are, what my morals are, what I'm ethically inclined to do or not to do. And so my point there was that I think the people who voted for me know who they voted for, and they know what my voice was going to speak to. The teachers represented me. They are all, at least the teachers who are in the union. I guess I'm not quite sure if we have teachers who aren't in the union. I'd imagine we do, if that's not something that, they can choose whether they want to be in the union or not, but they supported me. So I do have the support of the union laborers. I am a union girl. I will never deny that. I was raised by teachers. I was raised by steel workers. I was raised by people who stood up for the unions. And we do it because I was asked why we would stand up for the worker if there was no financial gain, which to me would make me question why that question is even being asked. Because for me, there is no other reason that I do things in life other than to stand up for the person who needs someone to stand up for them, because that is who I am and my core value. This is one of the reasons why I'm currently a student going to school to be a social worker, because this current job that I am in is just an opportunity for me that I saw myself and I took, and I left a job that I had prior to this because I had an insane amount of hours and overtime, and I didn't have anybody protecting me as a worker. And I had no time to do the things that I wanted to do in life. This job has provided me with that, but something that I chose to do my own self so that I can become a social worker, because that is where my heart lies. Another thing that one last final point was, it was stated basically that the only reason the council exists is to procure PLAs. And if we didn't have PLAs, we would not exist. That is not true. The majority of jobs in our state that are construction union jobs do not have project labor agreements on them. I would just ask the people to look into what a project labor agreement is, why they are in place, when they are put in place. The city of St. Paul uses them, the state of Minnesota uses them, the United States uses them, and they use them when there is a large job being done that requires a multiple crafted employee body to work on the job, and to do that safely, properly trained, with proper pay, with proper benefits, because it is about the worker. It is not about the financial gain. So on the Minnesota Building Trades website, where it does say that they negotiate and enforce project labor agreements, it also says right under that, they encourage equitable and harmonious labor management adjustment of differences between employers, employees, and local unions in the construction industry. To me, I think that says a lot. I would ask that if my voice is not allowed to be a part of the rest of this discussion, I am sorry that would be the decision. I feel that the people that voted for me put me here so that my voice can be heard on all issues. If it would be more comfortable that my vote be taken away from me, I would be more than willing to give up my vote in order to ensure that our district money that we have told our voters that we were going to protect and ensure it was properly spent, that this is one of the ways to do this. This does not deny a non-union company from bidding on the job. It has nothing to do with that. They are allowed to bid on the job. And I have a lot to say. I'm sorry, I'm a little worked up about this. I just feel like my ethics and my moral values are being questioned. And I would not do that to somebody else without proper belief that that is what they were trying to do. And I am a little bit disappointed that this discussion has come to this, and I would question the ethics or the appearance of impropriety of the people that are doing this against myself and against Mr. Mullen, who has already accused himself or recused himself of the discussion anyways. Because to me, I don't understand why ensuring equitable workforces are used on our schools where we preach about equity and everything that we have just discussed in the last 2 weeks. And then now we are saying, well, we agree with equity on everything, but this one thing we're going to say no to. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and I'm sorry if I sound a little bit upset, but I feel as I'm a little upset. I'm sorry.
Vice Chair Chapman, may I respond?
Yes, go ahead.
So first, I want to start with the last point that Board Member Thompson made, that she feels like her moral values are being questioned, and that's not the case. The case here is entirely one of how might the community, a reasonable person in the community, perceive the situation. Another comment was made that her vote's not being allowed and she's being prohibited, and we're taking her vote away, and that also is untrue. This is a determination for Ms. Thompson to make. The board doesn't have the authority. I've said that. The resolution says that. The board's not taking away any authority, any vote, any voice. That's her choice whether to proceed or not. I want to tick through a couple other points quickly. In terms of the report not being released this morning, that is on me, and I do apologize for that. I had prepared this in an entirely different format toward the middle of last week, and ultimately then decided to go with a different format that I thought was better. And that ultimately resulted in it not coming out until this morning, and that is on me, and that I agree that is late notice, and I have to own that. In terms of paragraph 15 and the refusal or declining to ask the question that was asked is not what she thought other people thought. It was what her understanding was. What is your understanding of what is wanted by your boss? The bonus, I want to be clear, no one's saying that there's anything inappropriate about the bonus that she receives, or that she would use it inappropriately, or that it'd be paid inappropriately. The point is simply, when I lay out the facts, I have to say there weren't criteria available that I was able to ascertain, and that is a factor that a member of the public might look at. Again, not to say that Ms. Thompson would do anything wrong. No one is questioning her moral character or moral values in this case. Paragraph 25, she stated, was taken out of context. I will stand by my notes on that, as I took the finding almost directly from the notes with the context in which it was made. There was a question about the council and what the mission of the council is, whether it's St. Paul or the Minnesota one. I did take that right off the Minnesota website. It's one of their mission statements to procure project labor agreements. Certainly, it's not the only reason they exist. I'm not suggesting that. But if they weren't going to seek them at all, one would raise a question about what that would do to the council. The question wasn't, why would you stand up for an employee if there's no financial gain in it for you? I've never asked that question. The question I did ask is, why would the council seek a project labor agreement if there was no benefit to the council in doing so? And I did record the answers that were provided to that question. So those are just the quick points I wanted to make. I'm sorry, Ms. Thompson, if you feel that you've been attacked. That certainly was not my intent. In fact, my intent was to the contrary, to make it clear that I had no basis, no reason to believe that you personally would do anything appropriate. I concluded you didn't have a conflict of interest. I simply laid out facts that I thought could cause a member of the public to reasonably question whether your loyalties were divided. And I think that is part of my job when I'm asked. And why did I go forward and do this in the first instance? Because your board policy requires it. It's one thing for a board member to say, I have a conflict. And again, I appreciate and I've acknowledged that it was appropriate for Board Chair Mullen to do that. But when he says that, he doesn't know if it's a statutory conflict or a common law conflict. And we need to ferret out the information in order to make that kind of a determination. And that's what I was seeking to do. And again, the facts also did change some, because as you recall, initially we only were talking about the St. Paul Council. And when I interviewed Mr. Mullen, that's the first time I heard about the Minnesota State Council. And so we had to look into that as well. So again, I'm sorry, Board Member Thompson, if you felt attacked. That was the exact opposite of my intent. And a big part of the reason why I wanted to have the findings in the attorney-client privilege communication, I was seeking to not have it sound in any way like this was anyone being out to get you or anyone else.
Okay, Dr. Newmaster, I believe you have a question or a few.
I do, and I guess I actually typed into chat and you got it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I just starred a couple of things, and Ms. Thompson already talked about two of them that I had starred because I wanted to make sure I understood point 18. And it's since Mr. Mullen has recused himself from any conversation with the total group and any vote on this PLA or not to PLA with contracts. You know, we've done the correct thing that's legally required there. Am I correct on that? It seems
Yes,
to me
yeah.
that's what I read this like 3 times to make
Yes.
sure I think I understood it. And I looked at my notes from our February meeting. It's hard to understand, but I think I do. So we've covered it. And then you go down to point 22 when it says Ms. Thompson does not have a statutory or common law conflict. So it seems like we're covered. And the only thing I do want to say is lots of us are union members or have jobs that are union jobs. And that's part of who we are and the kind of beliefs we have about rights people have for a number of issues that may or may not come up on a job. And since a person doesn't financially gain other than the fact that the union protects them in whatever job they happen to have, whether it's in a hospital or a school or on a bus, whatever, that shouldn't disqualify anybody who would tend to think that that's a benefit. So I couldn't quite see why the board would have to feel it would be improper for Ms. Thompson to have an opinion any more than or a feeling about something when we voted on it any more than any one of us who might have that agree with that same sentiment. So I can see Mr. Mullen recused himself, and that makes sense. But the other one I wondered as we go through this, and I know it's tricky, and I'm not a lawyer, and I've read through it multi times, but it seems to me that would make it hard if there's anything that we would feel people feel strongly on, even though they don't financially benefit from it, or they're not advanced by it. If we wouldn't agree with it, we'd say, I guess you have to step away for this because you believe this. So that was the part I thought was kind of a sticking point, but everything else makes sense. And I'm gonna not babble on here, but that's how I understood this. And it was, well written. I read it over and over, but I really found the sticking point to be 22.22. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Board Member Newmaster. I appreciate the review, the careful review that you've undertaken. Being a union member, having strong beliefs, strong views, having a union job, none of those things would create an appearance of impropriety. I absolutely agree with you there. If they did, then nobody could vote on anything, because I hope you all have strong beliefs, convictions, and views on a variety of matters. The reason why I concluded that there was an appearance of impropriety is because Ms. Thompson works directly for an individual who has a statutory conflict of interest with respect to the St. Paul Council, and directly for somebody who has a common law conflict of interest with respect to the Minnesota Council. And he is her boss. To some degree, one would argue she's beholden to him. One would argue that she's subordinate and she knows what his interests are. She knows what the interests of the organization are, and that might she vote for those reasons as opposed to her own views or the views of the community. And I'm not suggesting she would. I have no information or no basis to say she's going to divide her loyalties. My sole point to the board is that there are some facts where some members of the public might say, is she acting for this reason or is she acting for her own reason? And why do I undertake that analysis at all? The only reason I do is because your policy specifically addresses not only conflict of interest, but twice addresses appearances of impropriety, and that's in School Board Policy 210. And so I wanted to make sure, in the interest of completeness, that I address that. I want to reiterate again, too, that there is no notion that she's not permitted, Ms. Thompson's not permitted to have a voice or not permitted to vote or to discuss. It's a determination for her to make. Unlike the conflict of interest, which is a determination for the board to make, when there is an appearance of impropriety, the individual board member has to decide, is that a risk I'm willing to carry on or not? And so, again, I laid those facts out, not with an intent to speak badly of Ms. Thompson. I didn't feel that way at all after meeting with her. I felt quite the contrary. But I wanted to lay out the facts because that is what I'm hired to do, is to gather them and lay them out for the board.
Ms. Ellison, I believe you wanted to go next.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on a couple of things. I feel like this conversation that we're having right now illuminates the need for this conversation. That sounds really backwards, but I would agree. I don't think that anybody is questioning Ms. Thompson's morals at all. And certainly we, as Mr. Waldsberger said, all have strong opinions and beliefs on things. We are talking here about what our public is going to perceive. And, I hear what you're saying, Ms. Thompson, about, the people that you talk to and the people who voted for you, but I think we need to acknowledge that there are a lot of people in our school district, and I wish it was a different case, but there are more people in this district than people who voted, and our job is to serve all of them. And I believe that we need to consider what it looks like when we have these discussions. So I value your voice, but I think what has been laid out here is an understanding that this is really complicated, and we want to make sure that we are on the up and up in all ways. And the thing that we need to consider is the public's trust and the public as a whole in the work that we do. The other question that I had was about number 18, Mr. Waldsberger. Can you tell me more about penalties?
Paragraph 18.
Yes, please.
Yep. So for some reason, my document's not lining up here, but there are a number of penalties that can occur here, but they predominantly relate to if there's a board member who has a conflict of interest. If you know a board member has a statutory conflict of interest and you enter into a contract, well, that board member with a statutory conflict of interest is guilty of a gross misdemeanor. But the individual board members who voted with it, knowing that, are also guilty of a crime because they've knowingly engaged in malfeasance of office by knowingly acting in excess of their legal authority. And so that's where the real issue of concern is when it comes to the conflict of interest. When it comes to the appearance of impropriety, I do not believe there's any kind of criminal law penalty that can apply to you as a voting board member. What my concern is just simply, as you said, does it erode public trust or not? And ultimately, again, that's a call for that individual board member to make. When I was in law school 20 some years ago, my constitutional law professor would always say, let them vote them out of office. That's their penalty. You know, if you engage in something with an appearance of impropriety, let them vote them out of office. And that's the risk that you take. And it may be that Ms. Thompson says, that's not a risk I'm not worried about here because everyone knows what my views are anyway, and that's not a concern to me. And again, that's a call for her to make. But the rest of the board doesn't have to be concerned about penalties outside the context of a conflict of interest. If there's a conflict of interest, then you'd have to be worried about penalties.
If we vote to approve a PLA, is that correct, with the St. Paul Council?
Right. You couldn't do that with Mr. Mullen on the board. You couldn't legally do that with him on the board, even if he abstained. And now with the Minnesota Council, you could legally vote with him abstaining. But again, you have to abstain because he has a common law conflict of interest there.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions or comments from the board? Ms. Thompson? Angela?
Sorry, trying to unmute my phone and push all the right buttons without hanging up.
Sure. I know how that goes.
Right. I am just going to state that I think there's a little bit of, I'm going to leave alone what I said because I believe that what I said in my comments were what happened in the room, and that, you know, from February to April is a long time to wait to get all of this information. I would just add one more thing about if the public, if there's concern with the public. I would think that if the public was concerned with my work affiliation, they would also be concerned with a voice of anybody on our board being taken away from us or silenced like this. I think that, as it has stated, I don't have a conflict of interest. There is no financial gain that I would benefit from a project labor agreement. I have stated why I believe in them. And I personally do not believe that I would be concerned with the appearance of impropriety amongst our public trust and the confidence of the public. I think that I am doing my job to represent all of our community members. And as we all know, we don't all agree on everything. So that's always going to be there, which is one of my statements in this, is that, you know, people always will have opinions on things. No matter what we do, there are going to be opinions. There always are. It's that we all have them. That's part of life. We're humans. I personally just feel that I think that the public trust would be lost more so in taking the way of a board member who there has not been any legal conflict that I have personally done or would do in this process. And I will just, I guess, end it with that.
Can I make one last statement?
Go ahead, Dr. Newmaster.
I didn't figure out how to chat, but I just say this as someone who does, for the last many decades, pay attention to every voice being heard, because being a media specialist, there will often be a solo voice saying, this is not appropriate. You should not have this book on your shelf. And that solo voice or a small voice gets heard, but doesn't always mean they change the way you do things, because you have guidelines. We have guidelines here for conflict of interest. We've looked at it. And I just think voices, regardless of what they say, need to be heard if there's no legal sense that they shouldn't be heard. So I guess I'm saying freedom of speech and trusting that a board member, whatever their issue is, and you all know I've had mine, needs to speak sometimes, and sometimes just needs to be there as a representative for what they think, as long as there's no legal conflict. So that's my only issue with silencing opinion. Thank you.
May I respond briefly?
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to be clear again that no one's voice is being taken away. No one is being silenced. There's no prohibition. If you pass the resolution as it is, there's no prohibition on Ms. Thompson participating. It's her call to do so. It is simply encouraging her to abstain based on a concern of a conflict of interest. If the board as a body is uncomfortable with that and would prefer, you could strike paragraph 4 from the resolution. In my legal opinion, it's not going to make any difference. Either she's going to have an appearance of impropriety or she's not, and the public is going to be on top of it or they're not. And if she'll get feedback and pushback and so forth. And then ultimately, maybe there's a retrospective look and to say, was there a policy violation? I was just simply seeking to be proactive in including that information in the resolution. But again, if it's a divisive piece for the board, you can remove that. But even, again, to one last time, even if you keep it, nobody's voice is being silenced. Nobody's voice is being taken away. She can choose to speak. There's no ability of the board to prohibit her from doing so. And this resolution does not do that. It just simply calls out, hey, we have a concern. This would create an appearance of impropriety.
Which, I'm sorry to interrupt, which aligns with board policy 210. In that our board policy says that we have to avoid a conflict of interest or the appearance of. And I think that's that's the hard thing, is that what do these words mean? I'm not a lawyer. And so I don't think anybody's being silenced either. I think people are going to make assumptions because that's what human beings do. And so I don't think that we are telling anybody not to speak, but we have to cross all our T's and dot all our I's in a situation that's as complicated as this. So I feel like if it doesn't do harm either way, and we are very clear that we respect Ms. Thompson's opinions and beliefs, and are not questioning her morals, I think we need to access our own policies and ensure that we are doing right by what we have said that we were going to do. So I think that we need to figure out how to move forward on this one.
And as I see it, you have a couple of options. All the other points in the resolution are non-controversial because Board Member Mullen has said that he has a conflict. There's not a question on those points. It's just laying out the steps there. Paragraph 4 is the only thing that apparently there's some level of disagreement on. And a board member could move the adoption of the resolution as written, or a board member could move the adoption of the resolution without paragraph 4. I don't believe that taking it out is going to make a legal difference. It's a matter of public record that there's a concern of an appearance of impropriety. And ultimately, again, it's for Ms. Thompson to make that determination. So those are the options as I see them. But I would encourage you to, at a minimum, pass that resolution with items 1 through 3, because that is what your legal charge is to determine whether there's a conflict. And again, I agree that you access your policies and your policy does repeatedly reference that. And I want to be clear that that's the only reason why I've addressed it here, because it is called out specifically in your policy.
Okay, are there any other questions, comments, or discussion? Okay, I guess I'll just weigh in here a little bit myself. In terms of, and I basically am going to piggyback on comments of Ms. Ellison. I don't at all doubt the integrity of Ms. Thompson whatsoever. And I do believe that we have to look to our policies. There is that old cliche that in many people's minds, and I think in most people's minds, the reality tends to be anyway, that perception is viewed as reality. And no matter, what the situation is, and again, I believe 100% that Ms. Thompson is quite full of integrity and so forth. I do believe that there is the chance that people are going to potentially, some people at least, misconstrue her involvement in this process. But again, I also do not want to take away her right. And I understand, Mr. Walsberger, that, in looking at the language, that is not what we are doing. We are encouraging her to not exercise discussion and voting. But again, that's totally up to her. And, I just wanted to speak my piece, though, relative to the idea that perception is reality with people, especially people that don't know us as board members personally. They potentially just look at facts of the situation, or at least how they perceive the facts to be. And there could be, in this case, some questions that could arise. And I guess I would like to, if at all possible, spare the board of that. But again, it's Ms. Thompson's decision as to whether or not she moves ahead with involvement on this. That's all I've got at this point. Any other discussions, comments, questions?
I have one word.
Go ahead, Dr. Dewmister.
If we're looking at 4, when it says the board believes, and it goes on, that it would create, does it have to say would create or may create? Because the way it's said is quite firm about what the board believes. I could be comfortable with it may believe, and it obviously is Ms. Thompson's choice to speak or stay silent, to vote or not vote, and she would do what best serves our projects, the things we're working on. But if it says may, do we have to have the word would? Is that a direct quote out of policy 210?
It is not. You would certainly have discretion as a board to change the word would to may. As I said earlier, you'd have discretion to strike that entire paragraph if you thought that was the appropriate course of action. But certainly changing would to may is within your purview to do.
Just doesn't feel as harsh, and maybe not all of us think it would, but there could be that person out there that may feel that because they may not like what I say. And I could agree to that because Angela still has the right to speak or not speak and vote or not vote. But I can't see definitively that the entire board, and that means me maybe, believes that it would. It may. Lord knows, all kinds of things happen. That's it.
Kim, this is Deb.
Go ahead, Ms. Beloit.
I'd be in favor of striking the word and adding may, but keeping number 4 in the document.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to that effect then?
Yes. I'd like to move to strike the word would and have that changed to may.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
And that was Dr. Arcand?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any, I guess, any discussions on that motion at this point?
Could I just have a clarification? Is it a motion to adopt it with that change, or just a motion to make the change first and then to vote on it second?
I'm saying to adopt it, and someone else can make the motion to.
It sounded to me like.
Go ahead, Ms. Ellison.
It sounded to me, because I'm just trying to get notes on for clerk purposes here, that what Ms. Beloit said was she would be in favor of adopting the resolution after we change the word would to may. Is that correct?
I would first like to make a motion to change the word. And then I think we can do another motion to adopt the resolution with number 4 still in the document. So 2 different motions.
Okay, so the first
That
motion,
would-
strike.
That would make sense to me.
Okay.
Okay, are there any discussions relative to that motion then? Okay, clerk, would you call a roll on that, please?
Arcand,
Aye.
Beloit,
Aye.
Chapman,
Aye.
Ellison, I, Newmaster,
Aye.
Thompson.
Am I allowed to abstain from voting?
Yes.
I will
Yes.
abstain from voting.
Okay, and the ayes have it. Well, I should say, are there any nays? Okay, the ayes have it. Going back then to the original resolution, is there any further discussion, questions, comments from anyone? Okay. Hearing none, would the clerk call a roll, please?
Do we need a motion to,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we do. Yes, do I have a motion to approve the resolution with that change as stated?
so moved?
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, now any last discussion or any attempt here for further discussion?
Vice Chair
Question?
Chapman,
Yes, Dr. Arcan.
I have a point of question for the record. My question is, I once again want to hear that our question is that this resolution is in no way prohibiting Ms. Thompson from participating. This is clearly going to allow her to make her own decision, and we are not in any way telling her that she cannot participate. We are not prohibiting a thing. That is my question.
That is the understanding that I have. Mr. Walsberger, would you like to speak to that?
That is exactly accurate, Dr. Arcan. And in fact, the language itself says the board cannot prohibit her from either participating or voting. It is her call entirely. So you are absolutely correct.
What I'm wondering at this point is, do we need to, and I'm looking for a little help here, do we need to read the resolution at this point, or can we just proceed with the vote prior to resolution? Any input on that would be appreciated.
It's a matter of policy and practice in your district. If your district has established either policy or practice of requiring resolutions be read, you should read it and then adopt it. It's also a matter of public record on its own. There's nothing in the law that says you must read every word of a resolution before adopting it. So again, it falls back on what your specific district's policy and if you have an established practice is.
Okay.
I would say, Mr. Chapman, we did not read the resolution prior, item B5.
Okay. Okay, then I would say let's just go ahead and vote on the matter. Would you read the call or roll, please?
Arcand,
Aye.
Beloit,
Aye.
Chapman,
Aye.
Ellison, I, Newmaster,
Aye.
Thompson.
I'm abstaining from voting.
Okay, and I guess the ayes have it at this point without hearing any nays with one abstention. At this point, are there any other items to discuss at this work study meeting? I don't believe so. I don't have the agenda right in front of me here.
That was the last agenda item.
That was the last agenda item? Okay. Well then, with that, do I hear a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Vice Chair Chapman, I move to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, I second that, and we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have
Thanks,
a great
everybody.
night.
Have a good night.
Aye.
Bye now.